Hello and welcome to the Zach Brown Show, the show that introduces you to old friends for the first time. I'm your host, Zach Brown. On this episode, I talk with Marcus Vowell, co-host of Accidentally Derivative. He shares how his love of Star Trek eventually led to pulling a knife on James Franco. Well, something like that. All that and more coming up after this. Handcrafted under sunshine and fireworks, Core Memory Candles brings a level of quality that honors the Disney scents that they capture. Now your home or office can smell just like some of your favorite attractions and resorts. Whether it's flying over the crystal clear waters of Fiji, sailing past a band of merry pirates, or stepping through the doors of the Great Ceremonial House, the Walt Disney World Resort is chock full of memorable smells that stay with you long after you've returned home. Fortunately, Core Memory Candles has found a way to capture those smells and will send them right to your front door. Also available in wax melts and fragrance oils. But wait, you can also get face mask and fabric refresher sprays. I've personally bought many different scents and I can't wait to try more. You can get yours at CoreMemoryCandles.com. Core Memory Candles. Breathe, be home. Well, Marcus, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out here at the Zach Brown Show.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. I'm honored.
Yeah. The basis of my show is to, well, it sounds so pretentious, my show, this podcast, is just to learn people's stories, to find out about their passions. And it was kind of funny. I can remember meeting you for the first time, and it was at Lou Mangello's WDW radio event, Carnival at Maria and Enzo's.
Oh, yes.
And what was so funny about this, I hadn't lived here in Orlando for very long. And so I wasn't nervous, but it was this whole, I'm going to go to this party. There's going to be all these people I don't know. I know Lou, but that's about it. I'd met Jason and Lisa a couple times, but that was it. So I walk in and you were already there sitting at like the main table. And I was like, wow, I don't know who that guy is, but like he's sitting with Lou. So he must be like somebody. I need to know who this is. And so then probably a year or more later, I heard you kind of tell about that evening from your side going, I didn't know who anybody was, but I was sitting at this main table.
I was about to say, did I have you fooled?
And I think that's the greatest ruse of this game that we call life, as Prince so well put it, that everybody thinks that everybody else has something over them or some silliness like that.
Right. It's the whole metaphor of the duck, right? It looks all calm on the surface, but underneath the legs are just going like one can. That's the
exactly.
kind of same thing. Yeah.
So let's reel it back as if, so to make it easier for everybody that's sitting here who has this feeling of, oh, there's somebody, I must know who they are. Let's just invite them to the table and just tell them who you are. So where did all this start? Where were you born?
I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. May 5th, 1973. So at the height of fashion. But yeah, and I stayed there for 18 years until I graduated from Little Rock Catholic High School. Go Rockets. And after that, I went for 2 years to Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. And there I studied undecided. That was my major. Sadly, in the spring of 1992, my mother died of cancer. I was no longer, my grandparents decided to take on the burden of my college education, but I felt that I couldn't, with good conscience, stay at a place that was as pricey as Westminster was. So I transferred to my father's alma mater, Mississippi State University in Starkville. Go Bulldogs.
Yeah. Go Bulldogs.
There I studied theater, and my undergraduate degree was in theater from there. And then various strange careers like you have when you have a theater degree. And I went back to school for my master's in information systems, same school, Mississippi State, graduating in, I think, 2007. And then I've just been working in data stuff ever since, be it database management or my current job, which is geospatial data analyst for a fiber optics company called Unity.
So there's the
Unity.
the big 40,000
feet view, foot view, looking down at the man that is Marcus Vowell. And already we're hearing like two different things, which is so great. Very left brain, very right brained.
Yeah.
And I can remember the first time meeting you and like asking, everybody asks the same question. What do you do? And you start telling me about what your day job is. And then there was a period you went, but I'm also an actor.
Right.
So where did the actor side start in your life?
Oh man, that's a good one. Because there's so many ways. I look back on the development of me during junior high and high school. I mean, everybody's kind of the same goofy kid when they're in grade school, but once you start getting socialized and all of that stuff, and suddenly your relationships with other people start to become a lot more complex, you start thinking about who you are, right? And so I have a problem with my eyes. I am legally blind, my right eye. And all of the stuff I wanted to do as a career kind of required me to have good eyesight. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be an astronaut. And neither of those things were in the cards. And I was also, being a kid that wanted to be a pilot and or an astronaut, I was very much into science fiction, Star Trek, Star Wars, Star whatever, right? And star as we would say in database. The idea then kind of came out that if I couldn't actually be an astronaut, maybe being in a show like this, pretending, playing an astronaut in a show might be the next best thing, right? And I was already like enamored with William Shatner, of course, because he's Captain James T. Kirk. And so
the man.
I don't know if this is unusual for a kid my age, like when I was 12 or so, because like I remember back in my day when all we had was the original series, right? The motion picture hadn't come out yet. No, I didn't see the first run, of course, but so Captain Kirk is my captain when it comes to Star Trek. And I don't know if this was unusual for a kid my age, but I was also like fascinated with William Shatner as well for the exact same reasons. He's Captain Kirk. What is that like? What is being the guy that people look at and see on Star Trek as the captain guy? What is that like? And so that got me kind of interested in acting as a profession, because it was kind of weirdly fascinating to me that these people that are so iconic for being somebody else, well, they're also themselves as well. And what is that like, and so I always was interested in acting, but I never did anything about it in high school. Like I was never part of the play that they would put on, or anything like that, because mainly, and I say this, and I know you're like, what, but it's true. Back then I was about as socially outgoing as a dead snail. I was terrified of social situations. And then it's one of those things that when you look back on, like everybody has that thing when they take the inevitable speech class, that you get up in front of the class and you're terrified. A lot of people are just terrified of speaking in public. And if you sat down and thought about it, what is it you're actually scared of? You have a fear. It's almost debilitating. I mean, you're like, but are you afraid that your audience is going to murder you? I mean, what is it that is causing that much fear? And it's irrational. Of course it's irrational, because the worst thing that you could do is people didn't like your speech. And then you go home and who cares, right? But it's still, when you get up there, it's none of that stuff, you can't logic yourself out of being terrified. It's just like...
it's like the greatest human fear is to feel that you don't belong or identify with the other humans in the group, that you're going to be alienated, that you are the one that's wrong or dumb. Isn't that the silliest thing?
Right.
It's not actually dangerous, but it is mentally like the biggest battle you can fix.
Somehow, yeah, the just the massiveness of that possibility is pretty daunting. But that was the same way with me, right? And just talking to people, and I've tried to think back and try to figure out like what was the basis of that, right? I felt like if I didn't try, I could stay at 0. If I go up and talk to somebody, I'm putting some chips on the table at the casino.
Right.
And if I do the things right, then I'm up. I'm in the positive. But boy, if I don't, I'm going to be in the negative, and the negative is worse than 0. So if I don't try, at least I won't be in the negative. You know, and I don't know. It's something along those lines, though. But when I think about that, I'm like, that's closest to sort of what I was thinking, I think.
I'm just going to do my best to be exceedingly average.
Right. I'm going to try not to stand out in the least. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm not going to try to, I was just leave me alone. I'll leave you alone, and everything will be fine. So obviously acting on a stage in front of an audience, not really up my alley at that time.
Right.
But I found going to college was kind of a way to not really reinvent myself, because that's not something. These fears that we're talking about are pretty deep-seated. So it's going to be more of a transition rather than a switch that you flip. But I've said, if I'm going to do this, I have to do this now. And so when the theater department up there had some auditions, and this is kind of funny, because the very first audition that they had that I was going to go to, I got the play. I read the play. I'd never heard of the play before. It was called A Delicate Balance by Edward Albee. Still remember it. And I read it, and I studied all of the stuff, and I knew the characters and their motivations and all of that stuff, because I'd heard about that that's a thing. No formal training yet, of course. And then I went and I auditioned, and I bombed. Did not get a part. Nobody gave a crap about who I was or what I wanted, and that was it. The next audition, the second play that they auditioned, I forgot that the audition was happening until that day. And then I was like, and so I ran over there. I got in, I did my thing. I got a part. And then when one of the leads had to drop out, I got promoted to his part.
Nice.
And so from that day forward, I never prepared for an audition. Unless an actual monologue was required by the audition, which of course you have to prepare that. You can't just make one up. I guess you could, but yeah, if after that I was like, I don't want to know about the play. I don't want to hear anything about it, because when I did that, didn't get the thing. When I forgot about it, I got it, and I got all the way up to a lead. New tradition has been formed, or a new superstition, which of course actors are up to their eyeballs in superstitions and elocution, apparently. But yeah, so there you go. And then that started, and yeah, I was still stage fright, massive problem for me at that point. But the more I did it, the more it faded away. And now to this, now I can get in front of an audience without any problem, and I haven't had stage fright in decades.
Was it an instant like that when you got that lead role? You're promoted because the other captain couldn't fulfill his duties, and you were put in the proverbial chair. Was it immediate, like, okay, this is time, like this is what I want to do? Or were you still not fully interested in it? Or was it like, what was that for you?
The amount of time that I had spent as part of that production up to that point, this was a couple of weeks, I guess, into rehearsal, and it was about an 8-week rehearsal period before the show went up. So I had plenty of time to take over this new role with new lines and everything. But in the amount of time that I spent as a member of that production, I had fallen in love with the entire thing. And it wasn't even being in front of an audience, because we hadn't done that yet. It was just being a part of a cast and seeing everybody do their thing, and how close knit everybody was. And even I was a glorified extra, which isn't really even a thing in a stage play, but that's basically the level of role I had, was just some lines here and there at the end of the second act. And it was still already just mesmerizing, and I loved it. I loved being at the theater.
Yeah.
And so when they said, "Hey, this dude's got a bail on us. You're doing really good. So would you mind taking his role?" Like, would I mind? And so yeah, I was all for it. And at that point forward, I auditioned for absolutely everything that they had, and I got cast in most of it. Yeah. So
now, when you were so you've got the role, you've successfully made it through your first production, and you're moving forward. Do you still have that debilitating fear, or is it kind of underneath the surface, or was it wearing off at this point?
At that point, I don't know. It took a while. It took a couple of productions being in front of an audience. Not just that, like, like we had to have been like 5 or 6 performances, and not, college theater, not very long runs. But it took a few shows for it to start to fade. Now I still get, like, I guess, excited,
Sure.
but it's not a fear, right? It's and I tell you another thing that can kind of goof me up still, and that is this bizarre thing. And I would imagine any actor listening to this probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that is that when you are waiting to go on for your first line at the beginning of the show, for some reason, I don't remember what my lines are. I don't remember what my first line is. I have no idea. If you ask me right there before I go on stage, I wouldn't be able to tell you. As soon as I walk on stage, it comes out, and it's not a conscious thing. It's really weird. And that can still make me go, because I know it happens every time, and I know it's gonna come through for me. But for whatever reason, I'm like, this is going to be the time that it doesn't. And so that'll be like a little bit of a jolt of trepidatiousness. But
I don't know if that's just a stage thing, because I'm the same way. But from a musician standpoint, there are those times that, like, the countdown's going, it's about ready to go. And it's, what is the first chord? Or how do I start this? But once that first chord happens, it's game on. And you're like, you become a man possessed.
It's like dominoes,
all of a
right?
sudden,
because the first thing happens, and that leads into the second, and leads into the third, and leads into the fourth, and then everything just falls into place. But yeah, getting that first domino to fall, you're like, but yeah, it does happen. It happens every time. But you're like, is that 100% thing, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Have I just been getting lucky up to this point?
Yeah, I've just been hoping for the best, and you know what? We haven't fallen on our face yet. So here we go. Let's do it again.
Give it a shot.
It seems like there's 2 tracks with actors. It's either you're going to go to LA or you're going to go to New York. So did you have this kind of, I really see myself in that New York Broadway stage, the SNL kind of thing? Or was it like, I want to go do movies, I want to do big television? What was the drive? When
I envisioned my career, it was definitely an LA centric kind of thing. And mainly because I liked that style of acting more. I think I liked the ability to do a scene and be able to whisper. I know it's kind of a weird sort of thing, but it's like, I like the subtlety of acting for camera. Now I will tell you right now, having been part of both, there is nothing like performing in front of a live audience. And I think in retrospect, doing the job is more fun on stage, and is indeed more fulfilling on stage, even though you have to do it 25 times. And where with film, you're technically only really doing it once, although not really, because takes and whatnot. But yeah, that was the way because that was my inspiration, right? Star Trek and all that stuff. Well, that's all film. That's all television. That's all out in LA. So that's where I wanted to go. And the truth of the matter is, for an actor to want to go to New York or to want to go to LA, that's probably not, it probably should be neither, right? You should probably figure out which one you want to do, but take a route to those places, right? It's very difficult to go straight to New York and have things happen for you, or go straight to LA and have things happen for you. Now, eventually, yes, that's where you want to be if you want to be in either of those camps. And certainly there's film and television in New York, and there's theater in LA. So, I mean, it's not, they're not like homogenous or anything, but, you know, you want to go to somewhere first, and then sort of make your way there. It's a lot easier to, and I'll tell you exactly, I'll give you an example. Me, my, not the massive success or whatever, but the, just hanging out in Mississippi, where I lived for 20 years. When I went to Mississippi State, I ended up staying in Starkville for 20 years. And an opportunity happened in Canton, Mississippi, which is just outside of Jackson. And James Franco was filming a Faulkner novel called As I Lay Dying, down in the Canton area. And there was a cattle call for some of the lower roles. And so I went down there. I was like, hey, check this out. I'm going to try this. And so I go down there, and I was one of 1,300 people who showed up for this thing. And there was about a dozen roles that were available.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was in line. It was like a literal cattle call. We were all just in a big, long line, advancing very slowly and mooing towards the slaughterhouse. And I was reading for a guy named Speed. And I did my stuff, and then I left, and I'm driving back, and I get a call from the casting people, and they said, hey, we'd like you to come back and read for another role. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. And so I did a U-turn and went back down there, and I was like 45 minutes down the road. And I read for the rather interestingly named Angry White Man. And they're like, great. All right. Thanks. We'll be in touch. And I was like, okay, whatever. That was kind of cool. I got to do two. And so I went back home, and then a couple of days later, the casting director, a guy named Matthew Morgan, called me and said, hey, they want to see you again for this role. Can you come and do that? I was like, great, got a call back. That's awesome. So I went down, and I'm in this old house, and there's a bunch of people in there, and we're all kind of just pacing around and learning our sides. And I get called into the room, and it's very weird because there's a sort of a background behind me, and there are these big lights and like a camcorder somebody got from Walmart or something on this tripod. But then I'm under the lights, so I see these three people on a couch. I was like, okay, I'm reading for these people, but the PA was there to deliver lines. And then I do my thing, and I get mad because, hey, Angry White Man, he's got me angry, right? And so when I get done, this guy stands up from the couch. It goes, that was awesome. And he came forward and shook my hand, and I am shaking the hand of James Franco. And nice. I was like, oh, and it was like, nope, be cool. But something in my head was like, I loved you, Spider-Man. And so I was like, well, thank you very much, and I left, and I got the role. And so it was just a one-day shoot. It was nothing big, but I got to pull a knife on James Franco, and that was cool. And so it was fun. It was a great experience. And I went to the premiere and noticed at the premiere that my scene was cut out. So, yay. Oh, no. Yeah, but you get to a point in the movie, you're like, wait, this is after my scene. You're like, oh, man. Oh, well.
Well, there's that.
That's how it goes, though, But hey, I'm in the credits.
Well, for real, at least you've got that.
And they changed my guy's name to White Man on the Road. And I was like, well, that's a bit more Jack Kerouac. I kind of like that.
Yeah. It's not as aggressive. It's something you would actually like tell people, not just I'm angry white man.
Right.
White man
angry, that's presuming things. I'm just
exactly. You could have had a bad day. We don't know.
The Zach Brown Show will be right back.
Deep in the heart of Florida is a magical place where memories are made.
You mean like Epcot?
No, Sonny. I'm talking about Burmese John's Badger Farm.
Do they have rides?
Do they have rides? Nope. No, they don't.
Here at Burmese John's, we have the world's finest badgers.
Where'd you get the badgers?
The badgers are here. And that's all you need to know.
Okay.
This one's name is Demetrius. No, he likes you. Go on, scratch him's belly.
I'm good.
Now available for your birthday and corporate events.
Has anyone actually had a birthday party here?
Nope. Hence our availability.
Burmese John's Badger Farm. Won't do that again.
So probably about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was talking with friend of the show, friend of yours and mine, Jason Knapp.
Who?
And Jason, he's the guy with the mustache.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes, I remember him. Yeah. He parked my car once, I think.
And we were talking one night and he says, well, I got to run. He said, I got to go record with Marcus. And I said, oh, are you on the show again? And he says, no, we do it together. And I said, I thought this was just Marcus's show and you happened to do a guest spot one week. He was like, no, we do it together. And I was like, oh, all right. And I said, well, I guess I should check this thing out then. And I think you guys had maybe 8 or 10 episodes.
Okay.
And at the time I was doing a job that I was working remote, or, I was on the go, I was working out of my car. And so I had just scads of time that I could devote to podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I pick up this show called Accidentally Derivative with a donut on the cover. And there was somewhere a possum was involved. Yes. And I started binging these things. I mean, I was going through them like they were M&Ms. And I thought, this is the greatest thing ever. There's literally no script. They're just talking about whatever comes to mind. Tell me about how this all came about and the madness that is Accidentally Derivative.
Yeah. Okay. So this all takes place just like you and I met each other through Lou Mangello. I met Jason through Lou Mangello, as one might expect. When one has an orbit that full of folks, they're going to bang into one another every now and then.
It's true.
As awkward a metaphor as that was. I met Jason probably at the meetup just before the meetup you and I met. There was a meetup out at Epcot. And this was before we had moved here. I think I'm trying to remember if Carnival was also before we moved here. I don't remember. But because you said you hadn't been here very long, and you've been here about 6 months longer than me, I think. I don't remember.
Oh, okay. What month did you move here?
Moved here in November of 2019.
Okay, I moved here September of 2019. So we were right around there.
We're about right. So maybe not. But anyway, point is, I saw this dude and I talked to this guy, and I see that those are the ones that are like at Carnival were all around tables. That was a little tough because you got whoever you're around, and to actually like move around and mingle, it's really difficult when everybody's sitting at a table.
You're kind of locked.
And so, but that one was a much more in and out, meet a lot of people kind of thing. And so I just got to talk to this guy, and we were just kind of clicking. And what I didn't know is that we had a show about this. My girlfriend, partner, she was actually off at another part of this meetup also meeting Jason's wife
That's
at the
cool.
exact same time, which was kind of crazy. And so later on, as we're going home, she was like, "Hey, I met this woman, Michelle Knapp," and I was like, "I think I met her husband, I think Knapp. That sounds like what the guy." I'm awful with names, so I was doing pretty good here. I was like, "Knapp, I think that was the guy that I talked to." And so she said, "Well, I've made plans with Michelle to meet up at a restaurant in Winter Garden because we had just moved here for that. So we're definitely here." And so she's going to bring her husband, she said. So we'll see if that's the guy you met or not. And so we go to the restaurant and they come in. I'm like, "Hey, it is the guy. Hey, that's the guy." And so we sat down, and the rest of the evening was the 0th episode of Accidentally Derivative.
That's awesome.
Jason and I just started riffing off of each other and talking about stuff, and it was really just a blast. And then, of course, COVID happened, and everything is shut down. And it is very soon after Disney Springs opened back up that I met up with Jason at Morimoto, and we just were meeting up just to have lunch because we hadn't seen each other in a long time because of COVID. And we started talking about this stuff. And as we're walking out to the parking garage after lunch, I found I was like, "Let me throw something at you. What do you think about doing a podcast?" He was like, "What about?" I was like, "The thing that we do when we get together, that thing, I think that would make a fun podcast." And he was like, "Okay. Yeah, let's do it." And so then we just got together and started we recorded 5 episodes before we dropped the podcast for public consumption, just to see where it was going to go. It never went anywhere specific. So we're like, well, I guess this is what the show is. It's us talking about stuff. We're both Disney fans, so that comes into it, but it's not a Disney podcast per se. It's
just something that happens when you live in this area.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't avoid it.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah, but it ends up kind of being a podcast a lot about Gen Xers getting old, but and that's not on purpose. So I don't put that in as the category for the podcast. Right. But that does come up a lot. But considering we're both 48 years old, I guess that makes sense that would become a frequent topic. But that's this. We don't prepare anything. We have taken to throwing things at each other over text that we call pins. I started saying, "Well, let's put a pin in that to talk about that later," and he had never heard that phrase before, and so it just kind of evolved into this thing called pins, and that'll be a thing where he'll put just a 2-3 word thing at me in text. That'll be like, "My left sock," or something like that. And then all it's there for is for me to be like, "Hey, what's the deal with your left sock?" And then he'll have that thing. It's just something we see like, we're going to talk about this on the show. This is aggravating, or it's funny, or it's whatever. And so we'll pin it to one another. But that's the extent of the preparation that we make on the show. We have no idea what we're going to talk about. And a lot of times we have 35 pins in between us in the week preceding the recording, and we don't talk about any of them because we get off on some random tangent because I made an offhanded comment at the very beginning and he ran with it. Right. And who knows where it goes from there.
One of my favorite things. Well, I look at these sometimes because when I'm with Jason, there's just times he'll get keyed up about something or whatever. And he goes, "I got to text Marcus. I got to send this pin to Marcus." And I go, "Okay." And I'm wondering, I'm like, how many times do you get one of these, you guys send these flurry of pins to each other and then look at this and say, "I have no idea what this was about. Like, I know I sent this, it made sense at the time, and now I don't know what that means."
Yeah, weirdly enough, there's one, the episode that dropped today, we talk about that because we both did the whiskey blending thing at Takumite. in Epcot. And he sent me 3 right in a row, sitting next to me. Like, he's next to me and he pins 3 things at me. One of them we remembered. We could remember what that one was. And one of them was just a quote, and I can't tell if he quoted me or if it sounds like something that I said, but it was, "I've turned into a cartoon." And then we're both like, I have no idea what that means. And we were trying to figure it out, and it never came out. But then us not figuring out kind of became the topic. So I guess
wasn't that like a Seinfeld episode where he'd written down a joke and he was like, "I don't know what this means. Can you tell me what this says?" He could never remember what the joke was.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. Yeah. And that's happened a couple of times. A lot of times we'll be like, okay, I don't remember that one. Go on to the next one. But sometimes we have to stop and go, okay, I remember this one being important and one that I really wanted to talk about. But then we get back to the Gen Xers getting old thing again.
One of this little game that I love to play is when I am listening and I keep having to look over and either see the episode title or the donut image, which you change every single time, which I imagine you regret at this point because
extremely.
But I keep looking back going, oh, have we said the episode title yet? Or has whatever's in the picture, has this come into play yet?
Right.
And there have been a couple where it's like literally the last 45 seconds of the episode and you'll say the title. I'm like, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and that's just something that it's a lot like, what was it? Somebody's definition of pornography was, I don't know what it is, but you know it when you see it. But it's a lot like that. It's like, I don't know what this episode is going to be titled, but when somebody says something,
there it is.
You just get a title sense. It's like, there it is. And that was like Ted Fasto, I think, was one where it was like it was literally the last 2 words spoken in the episode. But
yeah, and then you guys almost always end on a giggle, and that's that. And it's just like you're ending on a high note. And good night, everybody.
Sometimes it takes a while to get that giggle, though. Yeah, that's the only editing I do. Where we start is usually when he calls. Or it gets added to the thing, or whatever you want to call it. And then there's a cold open, and sometimes that will end up being about 5 or 6 minutes long. Yeah, because I'm waiting for that cold open moment. You know,
where's that break?
There always is one, but it can be a while before you get there. And that's where I put the main title and the music, and then I fade back in. Shortly after that, sometimes I have to chop off a little bit where we still refer to whatever joke just happened. And I'll chop that off because it doesn't make any sense for us to come back in right on something else. I'll wait till we topic switch. Yeah. And then where to end it. And then that's literally the only editing I do. And that was a good decision, I think, because as big of a pain in the butt as drawing a new donut every week, putting a whole bunch of editing into this thing would have been a big regret.
Yeah.
So,
and really, I've tried to do the same with my podcast. We've made it a little difficult on ourselves, and this does tie back into you. It's always trying to find the where do we break and go to commercial. And something from the early onset was I said I want to like do commercials that are real and to promote things that I really appreciate and love. But I was like, I also want to come up with fake commercials, which is something that, I basically ripped from Prairie Home Companion and SNL. And I'm like, cause Prairie Home Companion, I always talk about, powder milk biscuits. And it's just this adds to the lore and the legend and the world that the show lives in. I was like, I want to do that. That's going to be fun. So then we start doing these things. I said, well, you have to have somebody other than myself do some of these commercials. We need somebody with talent, somebody who could do voices. And I was like, oh my God, Marcus does like accents and stuff. And I started, calling on you to do some of these commercials, and would have either played one already at this point in the show, or you'll hear one here in a second. But they make me laugh so hard. There's just certain things that you'll do that I'm like, I didn't anticipate, like I didn't hear it that way when I wrote it. But then when you said it, it was just this brilliant moment. So
they've been a blast. I've been enjoying doing them.
they crack me. And now I'm like, well, we have to somehow like either animate these or film these. We have to make videos of them because they're so wonderful. But just thank you so much for just your contribution to making the silly inside joke a living, breathing thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I was kind of flattered that you thought of me and asked me to do it. I enjoyed it, and still do. I don't mean that to be like an offhanded way of saying, okay, then, but I'm not doing it anymore. No, I enjoyed it, and I will, should you want me to do it again in the future,
Good.
Enjoy it then as well.
Perfect. So Marcus, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and just talking and sharing your story, your passions, and what you're doing. How can the listeners check out what you're doing and being a part of all that you are putting your hands in?
Well, it's
that sounded weird, but you know what I mean.
That's it puts it's hand sanitizer. www.accidentallyderivative.com is the website for the show. We are also have a Facebook page and a Facebook group because those are two different things apparently. Mm-hmm. And then we're also on YouTube, but we don't quite have the 100 people subscribed just yet so that we can get a cool, easy to remember URL. So
let's make it happen, people.
So just search for Accidentally Derivative. Jason is always on about how
in the show notes.
It's hard to spell. So I don't know why he's always talking about how hard it is to spell. But Jason, I don't know about his education sometimes. But so just search for Accidentally Derivative on YouTube, and we got that. And we just opened a cool new merch store, so you can get clothes and things that have a possum on them. At some point, we'll have to talk about the possum. Let's see. I'm also sort of a goofy amateur mediocre photographer. So vowellphoto.com if you're interested in looking at that stuff. And seems like there was something else I was going to try to do, but I may not have pulled the trigger on it just yet. We're going to try to expand the YouTube channel. Like we do a video version of the podcast on YouTube, and we're Jason and I have been talking about a couple of projects that we may be working pretty hard on pretty soon. And then I've got a couple of things up my sleeve that I'm doing just kind of on my own. I might be animating the possum.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't know. This is gonna take some stuff, but I'm gonna try it.
Well, to quote Henry the Bear from the Country Bear Jamboree, takes a little doing to set these things up.
It's true. Very, very true.
Well, Marcus, thank you again just for coming and hanging and just sharing. So I had a blast.
I did too. Thank you so much for having me, Zach.
You got it, man. I'll talk to you later.
Alrighty.
Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Once again, I'd like to thank Marcus Vowell for coming on and sharing his stories with us. If you're interested in learning more about Accidentally Derivative and Marcus's photography, the links are in the show notes. Want more of the Zach Brown Show? Follow on Instagram or give us a like on Facebook. I'll post behind-the-scenes pictures and updates on all the latest episodes. I'm Zach Brown, and I want you to remember, I'm rooting for you. Have a good one.